After praying to get Isekai'd into a fantasy world out of pure boredom, our overpowered protagonist Katal ends up babysitting a party of brain-dead barbarians in a frozen wasteland so deadly that even a conquering emperor warned people about them. The snow desert is packed with raid boss monsters like glacier-eating snakes and pollution rats, but right now, Katal is just watching his bald teammate Greta and a thick-thighed girl casually eat a massive poisonous scorpion they just killed. Katal warned them a week ago it was toxic, but they treated it like a noble challenge right up until Greta starts foaming at the mouth and collapses while the girl tries to literally slap him awake. Katal sighs, totally regretting his life choices, since back on Earth he was an extreme explorer who climbed the tallest mountains and hit the South Pole, only to get bored and pray for a magical adventure that landed him in this snowy hellscape. Meanwhile, a merchant caravan is pushing through the same blinding blizzard. The freezing escort guards are seriously regretting taking the job despite the massive payout. While inside the carriage, a kind-hearted blue-haired noble named Melina Akasha asks her thick-mustached butler if they can let the freezing guards inside. The butler shuts that down, reminding her they need watchmen to spot the monsters and the mythical barbarians that once broke a conquering emperor's sanity. The butler thinks the barbarians are just an old wives' tale, but right on cue, the escort captain spots a scarred, white-haired humanoid silhouette walking out of the thick fog. Everyone braces for the worst, but instead of attacking, Katal just smiles, instantly killing the horror vibe. He introduces himself as the Grey Barbarian, explains he was just out on a walk to get away from his idiot teammates, and casually offers to carry them through the desert as a hired mercenary. The captain is completely stunned, assuming barbarians were purely hostile mobs, but Katal dryly points out that if he wanted them dead, they already would be. The captain relays the message to Melina, admitting they have absolutely zero chance of winning a fight against this guy, so she agrees to hire him. Pumped to finally have a new job, Katal casually strolls right past the terrified guards to negotiate with the VIP face-to-face, nearly giving the poor old butler a heart attack as Melina nervously invites him inside the carriage. The situation is ridiculously tense, and our protagonist, sitting inside the carriage, asks the old man to calm down a little, since he has no intention of hurting the man, even though the two of them are squeezed together in that cabin. The young lady of the Akasha family is in a mix of tense and amazed to see a barbarian straight out of legend, but she carries the conversation anyway, being very polite. The hero finds it strange that it's so warm in the carriage even though it's an enclosed space, and the girl just answers that it's magic. Katal doesn't seem all that used to magic, but lets it go and warns that these desolate lands are dangerous, and with the weak little guards they had, they'd never make it across. The barbarian promises to protect them, with one condition. When Melina asks what he wants, the man answers that he wants knowledge of the world beyond this white desert. In the end, what our hero wants most is knowledge. The blue-haired girl confirms what he said, and really, it doesn't seem like a bad deal. Not that she has any power to refuse or actually negotiate, so the girl just accepts. With that out of the way, Melina introduces herself, and the barbarian introduces himself as Katal too. In his previous life, he always loved fantasy worlds, except now, he's a barbarian in a hostile, snowy world. Not much to do besides hunt and survive as best he could. He's been at this for so long now, he doesn't even know how long he's been trying to escape this place, except an invisible barrier kept him from advancing. Our protagonist gets the message that he can only leave the snow desert by completing a quest. The returnee hero was almost thinking about giving up entirely when he noticed people started coming to that horrible place on their own. Thanks to that, Katal realized that in this fantasy world, there's more out there than just those frozen lands. That discovery renewed the protagonist's spirits, and he stopped just surviving, completing quest after quest just to get out of that abyss. Our hero even tried to get more information before, but up until then, everyone would sniffle, fight, or go crazy at the sight of a barbarian. This time, at least he'll get to have a normal conversation with someone. Katal notices the caravan is carrying weapons, which surprises Melina. The man heard the metallic clanging of the carts and wants to know if that means there's a war going on in the world outside this desert. Basically, there's a war going on between the Empire and the Kingdom. The Empire is advancing on the Kingdom, even with resistance from the hero and the Swordmaster protecting the borders. Our hero is quite interested in these heroes, and Melina discovers the man doesn't know anything about mysteries. The girl explains that in this world, there exists a power with no known origin called the Mystery that can only be used or sensed by a few. The mystery has 5 distinct rankings of power. Those of 3rd category can only sense the mystery. Those of 2nd category can use said power, while those of 1st category are able to manifest the power in the form of mana or aura. Above those of 1st category, we have the transcendentals, like the Swordmaster, who are capable of grandiose feats, and the highest rank, given only to those who can influence the world itself, the heroes. The blue-haired girl explains that even just receiving a 3rd category title is proof of power. Katal doesn't even wait for her to finish talking and decides to ask to meet them. The barbarian has been surviving for so long now, trapped in a desolate, snowy environment in the middle of a world he still can't explore, that all he's wanted since being reborn is to get out of this frozen prison. Except more than just wishing for it, he's going to find a way out. Now it's the girl's turn to ask, and she wants to know if the young man really is a barbarian, which he admits without even hesitating. Milena explains she already knew barbarians existed because of the legends, which leaves our guy quite surprised, and the girl too, for not knowing he didn't even know the legends. After learning more about the Emperor's legend, our protagonist laughs, since to him, that guy was just some random lunatic. But he confirms that overall the legend is accurate, since he's met people from outside like that. The barbarian decides to ask why they're transporting so many weapons through the ice. And the answer is pretty simple. They need a lot of money, because their family, who used to be successful merchants, is now drowning in debt. And this trip is only to keep the family from going under entirely because of the debt. It's not easy for anyone, but Katal understood the situation a bit better now. To pay off the debts, the Akasha family is trying to sell weapons to the kingdom at war with the Empire. The barbarian's deduction was simple. If the Empire is winning, they must have more army and weapons. And since the kingdom is in trouble, they must have little supply, and the value of the weapons sold would be through the roof. Even more so, if this caravan is willing to risk it in the icy territory. The hero also realizes that since they're having to cross the snow desert, there must be no other way to bring these weapons without passing through the Empire. Sharp guy. Milena also found the young man too clever for a simple barbarian and wants to know who he is. But before she could continue with that, the carriage suddenly stops, and a scream catches everyone's attention, who were talking in there, and our protagonist recognizes that they have company. A creature made of mud is in front of the guards. Everyone is terrified by the sight, and the merchant heiress recognizes the beast as Black Slime. Our protagonist asks if that's really the creature's name, and it seems like yes, it's a registered monster. The records were written by warriors who managed to survive and return from the snowy territory, and the Black Slime is the one that appears the most in these records. The girl asks if the barbarian knows anything about the monster, and the young man says he does, and that this black slime is actually quite edible and a good little snack. Melina doesn't know what to make of that information, and Katal, trying to help, says they could catch one if she's up for trying it. Outside, the situation is bad, with the black slime advancing on the caravan guard, with everyone terrified. The merchant heiress even tried to get Katal's attention to help, but the barbarian doesn't seem like he's going to move. He explains that he made a contract with her, that he'd protect their lives during the crossing, but he doesn't think the monster is a real danger, so he's not going to lift a finger, since the guards can handle it. Besides that, Katal wants to gauge the strength level of the people from outside the glacier. Meanwhile, outside, the slime advances furiously. The captain orders the shield bearer to advance. With his shield in position, the young man tries to hold back the black slime's charge, which from the force pushed him back a few steps, until finally throwing the man far away like it was nothing. Another man leaps in with an axe, ready to attack, but he's also thrown far away without his axe, without even posing a challenge to the monster, which lets out a powerful roar to show what it's made of. The captain warns the men that a black slime only moves in a straight line and tells everyone to spread out to coordinate the attack. No one wastes time, and they organize themselves right away, ready to attack. With a plan of action mapped out, the guards advance around it. The soldier armed with a spear leaps over the slime and attacks with a diagonal cut. The creature gets irritated, but the boy isn't done yet and finishes his attack by throwing his weapon, which pierces the monster, making it writhe in pain. With a green aura covering his body, the captain advances, telling the men not to stop attacking. The man's shining blade cuts through the creature, which is already starting to regenerate. Normal attacks won't do any good. The black slime has a core inside its body, which must be the target. With precise sword movements, the guard captain pierces the creature, shattering its core. The monster falls apart, showing the barbarian was right. The caravan guards celebrate the victory, excited. While everyone celebrates, our hero just stands there, watching the commotion, because the guards aren't going to get any peace yet. They barely finish taking down the slime, and a snow wolf already shows up. As soon as they spot the wolf, the guards start focusing on its neck, and it doesn't take long before they've killed the creature. Now their confidence is through the roof, saying the ice desert isn't such a big deal, except the captain still has a brain and tells them not to lower their guard since they're not even halfway through the trip yet. Since the legendary monsters didn't seem like such a big deal yet, one of the men starts asking if the barbarian is also as strong as in the legends, even calling him a freeloader. As if that wasn't enough, they said they should at least test our hero. So after a little while, Milena and the others inside the carriage receive a visit from the guards. The guards complain that they're giving it their all for the mission because of the contract. And the blue-haired young lady thanks them for their effort, since many people fled just from hearing about the job. Except the problem for these men is something else. They're upset that so far, the barbarian hasn't lifted a finger to help, and they ask permission to check if the young man really deserves all this special treatment. Milena asks what kind of test they have in mind. The guard chief apologizes and says he even tried to stop them, but it didn't really work. Katal is excited. He says he doesn't mind them testing his abilities, but it can't be now, because they have even more enemies approaching. At that exact moment, with a spooky voice and a heavy aura, the monster says the weak foreign mortals have arrived, and it's going to enjoy this special little snack. The creature is a giant serpent that's toying with the guards like they're animals ready for slaughter. Striking fear into all the foreigners there, it puts on airs, saying their fear is a seasoning. In the middle of all that chaos, our hero decides to assert himself, telling the snake to get lost, that they're under his protection. The white serpent asks if the barbarian forgot the laws that exist in these icy lands. The man answers it's none of the creature's business, but the snake says it's not quite like that. Rising from the ice, the animal shouts that it's the serpent, the one with the promise of immortality, and that it should be superior to the barbarian. But since the hero doesn't have all that muscle for nothing, he charges in, landing that heavy punch on the creature, which feels the impact instantly. And man, with just one blow, the beast falls apart in an explosion, which forces everyone to shield themselves from the impact. When the dust settles, the snake is there, out cold. In a triumphant pose, Katal lets Milena know that he's going to clean up this mess first. With a powerful sonic leap, the man propels himself forward, preparing another punch that causes a massive impact explosion. After that display of strength, there's nothing left to doubt about the barbarian's power. The soldiers ask for forgiveness, but our hero says it's fine. It's normal to be suspicious of a stranger. With that, the caravan continues its journey. The butler is freezing to death, but inside the carriage, the barbarian says that judging by her clothes and manner of speaking, the young merchant doesn't seem to be just any regular representative of the family, and he wants to know why someone like her would be traveling and taking such a risk. Milena explains, and basically she's the eldest daughter of the concubine of the head of the Akasha family. Her mother was the result of a political marriage, so she was neglected and had no influence in the family. Basically, they were treated like servants. That's why the girl volunteered for the mission, since even though it's a risky trip, she felt she needed to set an example. Our protagonist admits Milena really is smart, but she's also ambitious. Except when the girl was about to say something, they were once again interrupted by an announcement. They had reached the end of their journey through the icy lands. Ahead of them, the ice was breaking away, and you could see grass. Milena thanks Katal for his help and asks how they're going to get back, and basically without weapons, they can go back through the Empire's territory just fine. But before they part ways, the girl has a few more questions for the barbarian. She wants to know what the man meant when he called her ambitious and clever. Katal just says it's exactly what he said, given her family's situation, even being the daughter of a concubine. She decided to take the reins while everyone else just sank. Because of that, the family's servants are going to end up deciding to support and follow her, who's probably going to take control. Katal wants to know if he got the deduction wrong, and by the look on the girl's face, no, he wasn't wrong. A bastard child taking risks to inherit the family name is nothing new. The girl, for her part, is impressed by the barbarian's intelligence and his power too. That's why she asks the man if he's ever thought about leaving the snowy fields, and if he'd like to join her. Our protagonist declines for now, saying he still has matters to attend to. And since that's the case, Milena hands him a necklace, explaining that if he ever leaves the snowy fields for the world one day, he can look for her family. The young man doesn't refuse a gift, so he accepts it. The farewell is even warm, with everyone respecting each other, but it's time to go, so our hero watches the caravan depart from a distance. 5 years passed after that event, until the hero finally completed all the quests needed to leave the snowy fields. Now, for the first time, this barbarian is excited, because he can cross the invisible barrier and see the world. Feel the breeze and the smell of the grass, the smell of wet earth and other scents he was never able to smell in the snowy lands. Now, before leaving for good, our hero turns to the territory he came from and tells that forgotten, frozen place to get lost. The fantasy world the protagonist always wished for is finally within his reach. Now he wants to enjoy the world of magic and swords, of elves and dragons. The wish that kept Katal alive this whole time was to get to know this world. The barbarian spots a glow in the distance that belonged to a place where miracles gather, which could very well be a village. Back in the snowy lands, our guy even tried to teach the other barbarians about the need for shelter, but they weren't exactly the brightest beings in this world. For that and other reasons, Katal missed human cities and villages. The young man rehearsed what to say and how to act when he arrived at the village. A little further ahead, an elderly elf catches the others' attention, saying that place would now be their new home, and tells everyone to unpack their bags right away. A little red-headed elf goes to talk to the elder to find out if the place is really safe, and the old man confirms it is. The territory is very remote, and humans don't usually come that far out there, except what worries the little redhead is that monsters from the icy lands might invade, since this place is very close to there. The elder explains there's no problem, nothing leaves the snowy plains, and they've also put up a barrier around the village to hide it. The barrier was made with cutting-edge magic so the elves would be safe, and even if monsters did show up, they had the queen, and no matter what monsters exist, they won't be able to reach the queen. Katal was touching the invisible barrier and could swear there was something there that he accidentally tore, but since he couldn't identify what it was, he kept walking until he came across an elf child who seemed to be lost. The young man got excited to see an elf, since elves are the most iconic race in fantasy worlds, and he wasn't expecting to be lucky enough to find one so soon. Except, while the young man was awestruck, the girl was lost and worried, until she looks up, and her heart stops for a moment. The barbarian even tries to be friendly, but his imposing presence, size, and lack of tact don't help. And startled, the poor little elf girl faints from fear. A little while passes, and we see Katal taking care of the girl. The man is quite worried. He barely managed to talk to the girl and she already fainted, so he figures he should take her back to the village. In the young man's mind, if he brings her back, the elves would welcome him very warmly because they're good creatures in most cultures. So he carries the little girl in his arms all the way there, except reality didn't quite go as he imagined. Everyone was furious or terrified, wanting to know how he crossed the barrier and thinking he'd kidnapped the girl. The elder is the one most surprised that someone was able to get there even with the barrier, but is warned that the barrier was torn. Katal tries to say he's not an enemy, but nerves are running high. The elder's head is also spinning, thinking they tracked him down. To the old man, this barrier with cutting-edge magic means the humans came fully prepared to finish him off. The misunderstanding is also shaking our hero, who didn't want to look like a kidnapper. While he's thinking about how to fix all of this, the little girl starts waking up. When she slowly opens her little eyes, the barbarian sets her down on the ground and tells her to go back to her people. Except in the little girl's view, our protagonist is extremely scary. So instead of helping clear up the misunderstanding, the little girl runs off crying, terrified, into her mother's arms. Katal is in shock at being so scary. In his head, he was a more easygoing guy. Taking advantage of the fact that he handed the girl over, at least the young man believes he can resolve the misunderstanding. But the elder orders them to attack now that there's no more hostage. Without delay, the elven archers fire directly at our poor hero. The protagonist is disillusioned. The elves are more savage than expected. He was expecting a peaceful people in communion with nature, but to them, they're nothing more than savages following the law of survival of the fittest. While the young man is standing there thinking about that, the arrows bounce off him like flies, not even tickling him. Even so, no one stops attacking. Stubbornness is in full effect. Fed up, Katal claps his hands and creates a purple wave of power with impact. The impact and power give the elves quite a scare, knocking down trees, sending the archers flying through the air, and causing massive destruction, of a kind visible from far away in the forest. The elder doesn't understand a thing, except now that he's finally caught everyone's attention, Katal can finally explain that he came in peace. Except since misunderstandings keep piling up in the barbarian's life, a flaming arrow like a phoenix hits the man, exploding into flames on impact. The one who fired that arrow was the elf queen herself, the heroine of the Leaf Clan, Marcelia, already showing up wanting to know what's going on. The elder explains that a human had attacked the village, and with that, the queen replies that this place isn't so safe then. From the middle of the smoke, our hero is unharmed for a change, and he begs, for the love of God, for someone to stop and listen to what he has to say. Everyone is terrified that he survived an attack from the queen herself. She jumps to hasty conclusions, saying it's surprising that someone with that much power came after him. With the typical disgusted look of a Tolkien-esque elf, she calls humans disgusting. The queen introduces herself to our hero and warns the barbarian as she readies her bow that she's going to make him pay for his greed. At this point, Catal doesn't even understand anymore. Obviously, everyone there speaks the same language. So either they're deaf or they really don't like humans. For our hero, all that's left is to use what he learned in the frozen lands, that if he manages to land a hit, the people will have to listen to him. Meanwhile, since listening is apparently a very complex skill, the queen prepares a special arrow and focuses on the invading barbarian, only to fire a powerful arrow that takes on the shape and aura of a beast. Except Saitama style, Catal readies a punch, which not only lands the blow directly but also starts redirecting the attack. The arrow's power is fired back at the queen. Judging by his face, the man didn't mean to hit it that hard, but it was too late now. The queen was completely flattened on the ground. Catal really doesn't know how to gauge his own strength, which is more than enough to terrify the queen, who's already recognizing the boy's power as that of someone above transcendental level. Completely terrified, the queen orders everyone to flee, and even with her people's protests, she just tells them to run far away from there. While everyone flees in a general panic, the queen recognizes the protagonist's strength, saying that whatever his goal is, it's not going to happen. Poor Catal just gets cut off and ignored, unable to even speak. Determined to defeat this powerful enemy, the elf queen starts summoning a mystical entity of pure flame. She releases a fireball into the air, and from it, Piego is born. A flaming bull. The barbarian is enchanted by the summon. To Catal, the beasts of the icy desert were grotesque, but an ox with flaming horns is a whole different thing. Piego really is a spirit worthy of a fantasy world. The queen orders Piego to annihilate our hero. The bull complains about being summoned just for that, but the woman tells him to stop complaining. Piego is a proud, ancient spirit. The elf queen could barely summon him with her own power. To make a contract with the creature, she needed help from another tribe. Piego asks if all he has to do is kill the barbarian to end the contract, except when the spirit lays eyes on the protagonist. He feels such a threatening aura that it makes him question whether the man is even human. The sight of the majestic fire spirit is a delight to our hero, who's completely enchanted, but everything changes with the contempt for humanity. Piego says he's going to eliminate our hero, burn him completely and leave not even ashes behind. The majestic spirit starts charging at Catal at full speed, who's just standing there like a dummy, processing everything. The impact generates an explosion. Marcelia shields herself from the impact and is surprised when she opens her eyes, only to see the barbarian holding the flame spirit by the horn with just one hand. Catal is more relaxed, seeing that the spirit has a bestial form, because that makes it easier to lay down the beatdown on the creature. Marcelia has already realized things are bad for her. The hero lands a punch on the fire spirit, which makes the ground shake and causes yet another huge explosion, one that tears through the forest and even generates light. The impact is gigantic, and the queen has to shield herself again. Fallen and defeated, Marcelia is out of hope. In the middle of all this destruction caused by a basic lack of ability to have a conversation, our hero remains standing, imposing. The elf queen begs Catal to spare her people. The man can finally speak, saying he's not an enemy of the elves, leaving Marcelia confused. After a while talking, this easily avoidable misunderstanding is finally resolved. The elf becomes convinced the young man wasn't an enemy and apologizes for the error in judgment. Marcelia feels genuinely embarrassed for mistaking someone who'd rescued a child for a kidnapper. Considering she'd said the elves fled from humans that way, Catal understands her side, but he's really not on the side of the persecutors. Actually, this is the very first time he's seen an elf, since there aren't any in the icy desert. When she hears that, the girl is surprised, and Catal explains his title, the Grey Barbarian of the Icy Lands. But the real surprise is that a human managed to survive in that nearly inhospitable place. The elf's fear now is that others might also emerge from within the icy lands, but the protagonist doubts anyone would, since there are strict rules and powerful creatures there to make sure they're followed. The hero managed to leave as part of a quest, but that's an exception. Marcelia feels more relieved, and the barbarian asks if the fire spirit is okay, since he split the bull in half, but she assures him it's fine. When a spirit is destroyed, it just returns to the spirit plane, and asks if our guy wants something to make up for how he was treated. Thinking of the spirit, Catal asks if anyone besides elves can make contracts with spirits. The elf answers that normally it's impossible, except in the case of humans with a strong connection to nature. Except realizing the young man was genuinely interested, she lets him know that if he really wants to, he has to go to the Sacred Elf, which is a holy land for the elves, where their deity resides. Normally, a human wouldn't be allowed there, but, weighed down by conscience, the queen Queen explains that, with the proper introduction, an exception can be made. The elf tells him where this territory is located, and remembers that letting a human get close to a place like that is extremely dangerous, and no elf in their right mind would do that. So obviously, the elf queen, who was fleeing from humans, wants to trust our protagonist and hands him a jewel. Katal accepts the gift and thanks her. Marsilia gives one last warning. The elf god might want to test the young man, but she's confident he'll pass anyway. After wishing him good luck, she introduces herself as Marsilia Hasian Karusia, and our hero returns the favor, introducing himself as Katal, the Barbarian. Sometime later, the Grey Barbarian is crossing the forest at superhuman speed and with a frightening, destructive power. With just one leap, he already covers a great distance between one point and another. At the border of the Varkan territory in the Kingdom of Gehent, the guards are already shaking in their boots and getting ready for whatever's approaching. Our hero's arrival through the woods is quite the scene. He stops in front of the gates, giving off that same threatening aura as usual, even without meaning to. The guards are terrified and on high alert, while Katal just greets everyone with a smile. Since the Barbarian came making quite a racket along the way, no one lets their guard down, especially when one of the men recognizes the gray hair and the scar of the Grey Barbarian straight out of the Emperor's legend. When our hero tries to move forward, the soldiers block his path, telling him to stop as if they could actually do something to stop him. But Katal immediately makes clear he's not an enemy. At least this time there's dialogue, and the guards ask what the young man wants with them. Slowly, the Barbarian points at the walls the guards are protecting and explains he just wants to visit their territory. After a while, we see that the Grey One was taken to an interrogation room, where he explains he's there to spend some time and even gives some information. The Barbarian has no kind of identification, but then remembers Millennia's gift to him, the Akasha family crest. Placing the crest on the table, the Grey Barbarian asks if this would work as identification and explains to the guard what the crest is, that it was received as a gift from a member of the Akasha merchant family. The soldier recognizes the family as the one that crossed the icy lands some years ago and tells Katal that this family has grown in power over recent years under the new leadership. The guard explains that even though it doesn't seem fake, it's from the Kingdom of Gehentra, so it would be hard to confirm its authenticity. Even so, the guard accepts the information as useful and gives him one condition for access to the city, that the young man confirm he's not a threat in any way. Basically, Katal is going to have to form a party to explore a dungeon near the territory, and since it doesn't seem like too much trouble, the Grey Barbarian from the icy lands accepts. The guard says he still needs to meet one more condition, to report everything that happens in the dungeon once he's done. Katal shows he's clever and understands the point of the process. The candidates don't know each other and need to observe and report on one another at the end of the expedition, which makes it easy to identify suspects and liars. The soldier is surprised and asks if the man really is a barbarian, and our protagonist confirms it. The guard thought only brutish, ignorant barbarians existed, but thanks the Grey One, ending the conversation. In another room, we have a man complaining about the kind of party he's going to have. Alessandro Tyrannus, the paladin, thinks it's tragic having to go into a dungeon accompanied by a 2-bit thief rogue. The rogue Kaysen Hark tells the paladin to knock it off, and things get tense between the two, with Kaysen saying Tyrannus isn't even a real paladin since a real paladin wouldn't be there. In the end, to the rogue, they're both in the same boat, and to top it off, he even mocks the surname Tyrannus, nearly starting a fight, which he's quite eager to have happen. The rogue's poisoned blades and the self-proclaimed paladin's sword clash until the third person in the room asks them to stop. That's Cleric Hayes, who's worried about exploring the dungeon with them. There are 3 of them, and since the prerequisite is 4 members, more members must be arriving soon. Proving she's right, the door opens, and a guard comes in to announce that the last party member has arrived. As our hero walks through the door with that usual scary aura of his, Kasan says he hopes the guy at least has some brains. The barbarian's size and imposing presence surprise the other 3, but since the young man is friendlier than a puppy, he flashes a big smile and asks if these are his companions. As usual, since our protagonist is huge, he generates quite a bit of pressure on the paladin, the rogue, and the cleric. Except the young man is a sweetheart, so there he is, all goofy, waving and greeting everyone. The guard closes the door, telling the 4 of them to get to know each other, since he'll be right back. Katal introduces himself, and even reluctantly, the rogue introduces himself as Kasan. The paladin introduces himself as Alessandro Tyrannus, and when the barbarian asks if he can use sacred power, Tyrannus explains that his situation as a paladin is a bit special, so he can't. Hayes, the cleric, also introduces herself as a follower of the goddess of lies and deception, Colossia. Since everyone's in the same boat, our hero asks why a cleric also wouldn't have identification to enter the city, and she answers it's because she follows Colossia, the goddess of lies and deception, so she's not very well regarded. After the introductions, the guard comes back, telling everyone to follow him. Catal, Alessandro, Kassan, and Hayes get ready. A while later, they arrive in front of the dungeon. It's a 3-floor dungeon with undead monsters. The mission is simple: complete the dungeon and come back with proof of victory. The Grey Barbarian calls Kassan over and asks the young man about the plan, immediately dropping any titles, since everyone there is a team. The rogue thinks it over properly and comes up with a plan. Catal and Tyrannus go up front. The rogue himself will keep an eye out for traps while the cleric provides support for the group. To the barbarian, that's a good plan. So with that settled, they enter the dungeon. Inside, our group advances. The cleric is worried about the darkness of the place, while Kassan is suspicious about there not being that many traps, as if there's something waiting up ahead. The rogue stops Catal and warns him about monsters ahead. Kassan points out the bones scattered on the floor and explains their skeletons, and that getting close would make them rise up. Learning that fact irritates the rogue, who realizes the city isn't just arranging a way to verify their identity, but also a way to eliminate dangerous foreigners. Catal asks about skeletons, and the man explains they're strong monsters that don't stop attacking even when dismembered. Being made of bone also means their defense is naturally high. The rogue tells everyone to get ready for a serious fight, and warns Catal that the neck is the weak point, and hitting anywhere else won't stop them from moving. Knowing this, the barbarian advances, and immediately the skeleton starts rising up in front of our gray guy. The skeleton draws a sword, and its eyes light up, and the party is already on high alert to face the creature. Catal gathers momentum with his hand, and when the monster goes to attack with the sword, the gray barbarian lands a dry slap that just turns the beast into dust. The whole party is terrified by the young man's power, who, with a goofy smile on his face, thanks Kassan for the tip about the neck, saying the monster really did stop moving when they hit the head. That's not quite what the young man meant, but okay. Skeletons are supposedly quite resilient monsters. Their bones aren't the same as human bones, and they're also strengthened by the dungeon's mana. Hitting one of them was like hitting a tree, and that means our hero is really strong, to the point where the rogue wonders if he's even human. Since the skeleton is out of the fight, it's time to move on, and the group hurries to continue completing the dungeon. Catal says not to run so much, but the cleric and the paladin are literally shaking for their lives after that display of strength. After walking a bit more, Catal notices something strange when he steps on a skeleton, meaning there's still more on this floor. Sure enough, the monsters start forming in a quantity that leaves everyone terrified and on high alert. Except luckily for this courage-lacking group, the Grey Barbarian asks them to leave it to him, since there's something he wants to test. And since no one objects, he just gets ready. An armed skeleton approaches, and the party keeps an eye out to see what the hero is going to do. The gray guy himself is actually fascinated by the way these creatures manage to stay standing. The monster even tries to attack, but it's not like it's a real threat. With 2 fingers, the barbarian stops the strike and breaks the monster's sword just to see what it'll do. The skeleton pulls back and leaps, preparing a more direct attack at the young man's neck, who again catches the blow, impressed by the monster. At this point, it's already torture, and he yanks off, crushing the bone, knocking down the creature's hand, which crumbles completely, leaving even the skeleton itself confused. The monster gets furious, but shows some skill, switching the sword to its other hand, which just leaves the hero even more fascinated. The poor skull still insists on attacking the barbarian once more, and the result wouldn't be any different. The barbarian catches its hand and rips off yet another limb. The humiliated skeleton still doesn't give up and attacks again, trying to use its broken radius and ulna as a weapon this time, showing some intelligence and adaptability. While our hero has fun for the other party members, it was like watching a real barbarian's torture session. After a bit more time playing with the beast and traumatizing the party members, only the monster's skull was left, still insisting on moving. Catal was surprised the monster was that resilient, and then stomps on the skull, satisfied. After the horror show, the Grey Barbarian simply apologizes for delaying the group, who don't even have the courage to complain to the young man. Stepping over the dust of what used to be the skeleton, Catal calls his allies to move forward. After walking a bit more, they stop at the stairs leading to the dungeon's 2nd floor. As they go down, you can tell the mood feels a little weird, but finally the rogue gets everyone's attention and asks to rest for a bit, which Catal calmly accepts. to Kasan's relief, who seemed genuinely worried that the barbarian would be relentless. Everyone's taking a bit of time to rest, and there's a clear tension in the air, until Katal himself decides to ask them something about dungeons. He starts off apologizing for not knowing much about dungeons yet, but the cleric says she'll help however she can, and asks what he wants to know. This dungeon is very close to the city, so what the hero wants to know is if there's any problem resulting from the monsters that are in the dungeon, and she answers that even though there are exceptions, monsters don't usually leave dungeons or venture outside of them. The rogue interrupts, explaining that dungeons are natural phenomena that emerge as towers and caves near areas with large populations, which is why the dungeon is near the city and not the other way around. When a dungeon appears, the lord of the territory checks its danger level and sends mercenaries, guards, or foreigners to complete it. This also means a dungeon always shows up near large population centers, but never inside the territory itself. Katal asks if there are rewards for completing the dungeon, and yes, there's usually a boss at the end of the dungeon, with rewards for defeating it. The cleric herself says that in this kind of dungeon, the reward can be pretty nice. Our barbarian is happy. This is just like the video game system from his past life. He says he's curious about just one more thing, and asks who's creating the dungeons. The cleric looks confused, and answers that they're natural phenomena, meaning nobody creates them. But to the protagonist, there are too many coincidences for it to be something natural. They only appear near populated areas, luring people in with the promise of rewards. All of this is way too convenient to be natural. The cleric hadn't thought about that before, but now that she's heard it, it makes a lot of sense. Kasan also had never thought about that, not even doubting that it was something natural. He's surprised that a barbarian is the one questioning the natural order, especially since he always saw barbarians as ignorant and cruel. But if that were still true, Katal, the Grey Barbarian, is no ordinary barbarian. After satisfying his curiosity, our hero asks if everyone has rested enough, and since everyone is rested, it's time to continue the mission. Our heroes are on the second floor, until Katal discovers a chest there. These chests are labyrinth rewards, and he just needs to unlock it to get it. Kasan thinks that opening a chest like that would require a truly elite rogue, a really good one, so he's already thinking about giving up when Katal asks him to open it. For the barbarian, the logic is simple. This is a chest. Kasan is a rogue, and the rogue's job is to deal with chests. That's why he's asking. Kasan knows the logic isn't wrong, but the thing is, he wouldn't even be in this dungeon if he were a good rogue, since he doesn't know how to pick locks, and he's so mediocre that he's not even recognized by the guild. Except the worst part is that Kasan can't even tell our hero that, out of fear of disappointing the big guy and being called useless. With that fear in mind, the young man promises to try to open the chest. While Kasan struggles to unlock it, the barbarian stands behind him, watching everything and unintentionally causing pressure. The rogue is straining to remember the skills he saw others do when he was a porter, all while under immense pressure that makes him feel like he's going to die. After a few minutes, the rogue hears a small click, and finally, to his delight, the chest opens. The cleric gets excited, saying she'd heard that only skilled rogues could pull off something like that, and that information impresses the Grey Barbarian too. But the one who was also quite surprised was Kasan himself, who thought it was impossible, but the fear of dying spoke louder. Meanwhile, Katal asks about the treasure's value, and the cleric says it's enough to feed a family for a month. So since that's the case, the barbarian tells Kasan to handle carrying the treasure. While putting everything in a sack, the rogue sees a different-looking cup, only to get startled by our hero, who just wanted to know if the young man needed help. Walking a bit further, the party comes face to face with another group of skeletons, and since there seem to be 4 creatures, Katal says he'll handle 3 of them, and the party should deal with the rest. Now everyone gets ready to fight, and the protagonist takes a few steps forward just to activate the skeletons. The rogue admits he always gets chills when he sees the skeletons assembling themselves. The 4 monsters rise up, and the party gets ready to fight with the cleric's buffs on the trio. When the fight begins, everyone charges at the skeletons. The rogue goes straight for the creature's neck. The other skeletons make a move to advance, except they're grabbed by the neck by the protagonist's hands, who holds all 3 of them and tells them not to interfere with the show. The freed skeleton attacks with its sword, but the paladin raises his shield to block, holding the attack while the rogue leaps over it to land a direct attack on the neck. Taking advantage of the chance, the cleric enchants the confusion shadow over the paladin, who cuts through the monster with a clean, powerful slash. The impact brings the skull to its knees, cracking its neck and leaving it furious. Entertained, the barbarian is playing with what's left of his 3 skeletons, saying it's pretty cool to see a party's combined skills firsthand, and then, eliminating all 3 skeletons completely, he says he wants to enjoy the rest of the show. While fighting with their single enemy, the other party members realize the barbarian is testing them, Under the pressure of being tested by the barbarian, the poor skeleton is in mortal danger, since the heroes aren't willing to show any weakness. Humiliated, the creature starts disappearing with a tear in its eye socket, and after this victory, our party collapses to their knees, exhausted. Seeing the trio's performance, our hero realizes the mercenaries he helped in the icy lands were quite strong. Now we skip ahead a bit in time, and the heroes are on the 3rd floor. There are more skeletons, but with Katal, it's not a problem. So, after a little while, the 4 of them are near the dungeon's final challenge, the boss, a skeleton knight. The mention of this boss freezes the cleric with fear, while Katal doesn't even know if this creature is really any different from the others he's faced before. The skeleton knight, as the name implies, uses a long sword, a shield, and armor. To take him down, a warrior needs at least knight level. Katal asks what would happen if the party decided the danger was too great and retreated, and the rogue answers they'd request territorial confirmation to see if the choice to abandon the dungeon was reasonable. Katal thinks that makes sense, but decides to go at the skeleton knight boss anyway. The big boss shows off a red aura as our hero approaches. The gray barbarian of the icy lands finds the concept of this creature quite interesting, and while the monster raises its sword to attack, the cleric notices something about the coming attack and summons a protective barrier. The attack is powerful and starts cracking the shield. Hayes doesn't seem like she'll hold out much longer. Sure enough, the shield breaks, and this time it's the paladin who holds the attack. Even though it worked, the poor paladin is already on the ground. The creature's strength caught Katal off guard after all. Such a powerful attack can only mean the monster is quite strong. The Skull Knight doesn't wait any longer and charges full force at the hero, who just stands still, waiting, and when the distance closes, he bursts the boss's chest with a right cross, which disintegrates the entity instantly. The beast didn't even have time to attack. At this point, it's honestly impressive, but the group is still surprised by the boy's brute strength, who, wiping his hands, asks if that was all for the dungeon, at least until he sees something else that catches his attention. Our hero calls Kasan and asks if the rogue can open that final chest. The man explains it's impossible because it's a much higher level lock than the other one, and just as he's apologizing, Katal just smashes the chest open out of sheer ignorance, to the rogue's total shock. Now that the chest is wide open and the treasure in view, the gray barbarian says he thinks these rewards should be even better than the other chests, and asks the rogue to gather the rest. And even though he obeys, Kasan is now wondering, if the guy could break the chest from the start, why did he ask the rogue to unlock it first? The raid is over and everyone's heading out. After our hero leaves the dungeon, he hears a noise, and the cave entrance simply disappears in front of everyone. Kasan explains that if you fully complete a dungeon, including secret rooms when there are any, it disappears. Katal asks his ally about the existence of these rooms, and the man answers they're pretty rare, which is already enough to excite the barbarian, who's quite interested in that. Back with the guard, the man is surprised by how fast the party came back from the expedition, and gets straight to the point, asking how things went in there. With a confident, goofy smile, Katal answers that the dungeon was satisfactory. After that, the guard decides to start the entry procedure and asks each person, one by one, to enter the room to give individual statements. Hayes says she had no problems, and the guard asks if she thinks the barbarian could be allowed into the domain, but notices she gets a bit distracted when the subject is the barbarian. The procedure isn't just about completing the dungeon, but also checking statements to avoid letting troublesome people into the city. Kaysen says the barbarian doesn't seem like the type to cause trouble, and Alessandro also confirms the big guy didn't cause a single bit of harm to the party, which confirms to the guard that he's a barbarian unlike others. Our boy's statement is the most thorough and enthusiastic. He praises Kasan for disarming traps and opening the treasure chest, Alessandro as a knight, and Hayes for her support. The guard captain is quite surprised the young man is speaking so highly of a bunch of strangers he was forced to adventure with, but since there's nothing too suspicious, he allows the group entry into the city, explaining that if they cause trouble, they'll be exiled before handing over the completion reward. Our hero receives the sack of loot and says he's going to split it equally among everyone. The other team members try to decline, but our hero says everyone worked together so they can't refuse like that, before inviting everyone to go grab some drinks at a nearby bar. The trio even agrees, but they're scared to death and anxious to get away from the destructive giant. The captain keeps an eye on them while the group heads to some bar, and thinks about the power this barbarian has, at least knight level and above, being the barbarian of legend. After thinking it over for a bit, he leaves the other guards in charge of border watch, and says he's going to see the lord of the territory. The lord's mansion is white and imposing. Chandelier lights illuminate the lord's room at night. The guard captain is announced, and permission to enter is granted. The lord of these lands, Luke Barkin, is the master of the domain in Barkin, in the kingdom of Gehent. The captain begins his report and lets him know a barbarian showed up in the domain, and after a while explaining the situation, Lord Barkin asks if the guard allowed him entry. Answering, the man says he assessed the case and believes there's no problem in allowing entry, which makes the Lord ask, "So what's the problem then?" It turns out the barbarian is too strong enough to become a problem. And when the Lord asks just how strong he is, his soldier explains he's strong enough to wipe out a skeleton knight with a single punch. The skeleton knight is a monster of knight level and above, so our hero's feat is quite remarkable. Barbarians are seen as a bunch of ignorant people who value strength above all else. So with that, the Lord asks if the man thinks the barbarian could be a first-class mystery wielder, and the soldier says there's a high chance, maybe even that he's stronger still. The Lord is a bit worried because since for barbarians, strength is law, our hero could end up being a problem, and because of that, he asks the captain to summon the man right away, explaining it's just to see what he's like and ease his mind a bit. Barkin calms the soldier, saying he has his knight with him if the situation gets tense or dangerous, and even asks the knight what he thinks. The knight answers that a barbarian is too simple-minded, even if strong, and wouldn't be a match for the techniques taught by the Grand Swordmaster. With that confidence, the Lord sends for the barbarian to come talk. Meanwhile, our hero is at the bar, eating and celebrating the victory with some drinks. The rest of the party is still quite tense, but Catal is enjoying the atmosphere of the place, the food, and the quiet, and even tells everyone to eat since he's paying the bill, poor things. Starting a conversation, the gray guy asks Alessandro about being a paladin and wants to know what kind of divine power he has, since he didn't see it used in the dungeon. Tyrannus explains he's still in training, so he hasn't awakened any yet, which is a shame. Now he asks Hayes about her deity, Colosia, and if there's a temple or something like that nearby, except the girl explains her goddess isn't very welcome in general. Colosia is the goddess of lies and deception, a deity normally rejected by the people. Hayes then decides to ask our protagonist a question, wanting to know how strong he really is. The gray one thinks about it, and says he doesn't really know about the ranks since he only recently left the frozen lands. He barely knows how strong a skeleton knight even is. The cleric explains that to kill a boss like that, you have to be at least second class. So to kill it with one hit like Catal did, you'd have to be at least first class. While they're talking, someone catches the barbarian's attention. The poor tavern employee is shaking with fear, but has to explain it's time to close the place. Luckily for the young man, our protagonist is quite polite, apologizes, and gets up to leave. Ready to end the night, the barbarian asks the group if they have plans already or are free, except since everyone's dying to get away from the guy, they all say they'll be pretty busy. Our guy is disappointed and says goodbye, saying he hopes to see everyone again someday, which to the trio seemed like quite a sweet farewell. Our guy finally ends the day, lying in a real bed for the first time since he was reborn into this world. The room wasn't expensive for him, with the dungeon reward, and this place definitely beats the icy lands 10-0. Finally, in a real civilization, Catal thinks about his next step. He wants to go on an adventure, visit the sacred elf land, see the magic tower, the royal capital, and while thinking about what he wants to do, he ends up falling asleep. The next morning, the gray barbarian wakes up to the sound of someone knocking on his door. The guard chief apologizes for waking the young man, but already explains why he's there. The lord of the territory wants to meet our hero personally. The lord of a territory is the master of those lands. Catal wonders what someone like that would want with him, but agrees to go with the captain, just asking to get dressed first. When Catal arrived in the city, it was nighttime, so he didn't see much of the place, but he's enchanted by it. The barbarian can barely contain his excitement, leaving the guard a bit uncomfortable, to the point of trying to look away as much as possible to avoid getting involved. It doesn't take long for them to reach the Lord's mansion, who invites the Grey One to come in. Inside, Barkin greets our hero and introduces himself properly. Catal, the Grey Barbarian, greets the Lord with quite a bit of politeness and reverence, which really surprises the Lord. Normally, out of pride and strength, barbarians don't bow their heads to anyone. Ignoring his own surprise, the man invites our hero to sit. Our hero sits in front of the Lord and looks around, impressed by the luxury of the Lord's mansion, except there's something even more interesting to the barbarian, the knight protecting the Lord. Before being reborn, Catal was a huge fan of knight games, so it's really cool for him to see a real one. Except the knight, seeing the Grey Barbarian staring at him, mistakes his gaze for murderous intent and gets quite tense from the pressure. Except before he could draw his sword, Barkin gets the Grey One's attention. The man explains he called the hero to check on a few things, and the protagonist is quite relaxed about it, asking what he wants to know. First, the young man's origin, and he explains he came from the coldest corner of the world, the icy desert, which catches both the knight and the lord by surprise as they realize this barbarian is the same one from the legends of the Mad Emperor. Barkin says it's hard to believe that, but Catal says the place was horrible, and the noble can choose not to believe it if he wants. So the man decides to ask our hero another question. How strong is he? In the noble's mind, knowing how dangerous the barbarian could be is a priority, and Catal explains he doesn't quite know how the power levels of these lands work, to say. Barkin exchanges glances with his knight, and it's decided, for the man, a good way to test the barbarian's power would be a friendly duel with the knight. Our hero thinks it over, and the lord explains it's obviously not going to be a fight to the death, and that gets the young man quite excited, and he accepts, eager to face a knight in combat. The young man, who's already the #1 fan of knights, is going to face a fantasy knight with mystical powers, aura, and cool techniques, so he's quite pumped about it. But in the other two's eyes, all he's giving off is a brutal, violent aura of love for battle. In the city's Colosseum, the lord watches from his box, while the two men prepare to fight. The knight and the barbarian face off before the confrontation begins, each eager in his own way. Barkin just asks for no bloodbath before ringing the bell to start the match. The knight already starts getting cocky, saying it'll be an honor for the barbarian to witness his prowess with the sword, except since the young man is a knight fanboy, he's genuinely excited to see it. Our protagonist's relaxed attitude leaves the knight furious and determined to show he's much stronger than the barbarian as he advances. The man analyzes Catal, who's just standing there, looking clueless. When he gets close, the knight's sword glows with a green aura and seems to split into 3 blades, a technique that leaves the legendary gray barbarian incredulous. At first, it seemed like an illusion, but while dodging the 3 blades, our protagonist realizes it's not quite that. The 3 swords are real, and that's what the knight meant by skill. Seeing that the hero only knows how to dodge, the knight gets full of himself, thinking all the barbarian can do is dodge attacks. Since he believes he won't see anything more from Catal, the knight plans to finish this off once and for all. Except, of course, it wasn't going to go the way he wanted, and with a flick, the barbarian destroys the knight's sword. Caught off guard, the swordsman is grabbed by his breastplate. The barbarian grips the plate with such force that it distorts the metal like it's paper, before throwing the warrior far away, with quite a bit of force. The lord of the land is incredulous, since in a very short time, and with just 1 blow, the knight is embedded in the wall, wounded and unconscious. All it cost was 1 blow, and a top-tier knight was defeated with a single strike. Since the fight's over, Catal turns to the noble and asks if that was all. Barkin thinks about what he saw, a high-ranking barbarian with monstrous strength, and even so, it's still not possible to gauge the full extent of his power, and someone like that could throw the world's balance completely off. The noble seriously considers reporting this to the swordmaster, and back in the mansion's throne room, he anxiously awaits the man's arrival, wondering if the barbarian's current situation would interest him. Sure enough, through the open window, an elderly man appears. Barkin sighs, saying the old man has some pretty annoying bad habits, but the old man just answers that he needs to have fun sometimes. The swordmaster's name is Kane, who wants to know what this is about. First of all, following etiquette and protocol, he stands up and thanks the sword lord for coming so quickly. The two of them go to the infirmary to visit the defeated knight, who's in bed, being visited by Barkin. The knight apologizes and says he'll be fine in a few days. But back in the present, it's the master who apologizes, on behalf of the student defeated by some nobody barbarian. The master also observes the young man, surprised he has no real injury on him. Kane saw the knight's broken armor and saw his torn clothes, but other than that, there wasn't a scratch on the man, which means Catal was merciful. Just from this visit, the old man has already confirmed our protagonist isn't reckless, and is quite precise in the use of his own power. Since he had to show mercy, it also means he's at a level above a knight, meaning at minimum, a superhuman. The man's conclusion surprises the lord and the knight. The noble decides to ask if the sword lord thinks our hero is stronger than him, and the man answers, he's strong, but I'm a swordmaster, right? That guy hasn't beaten me yet. The elderly man analyzes the situation a bit more, and doesn't think the gray barbarian used aura, which could simply be the power of someone who survived the icy lands. Barkin didn't want to believe Catal's story about coming from there was true, except it seems it really is. A barbarian from the icy lands, the human whose existence was passed down as legend, and for the old man, maybe he's not even human at all. but one of the monsters from that place. Except the idea is kind of dumb and he dismisses it, since if he weren't human, he wouldn't have shown control and mercy toward the knight. Even so, the old weapons master is thoughtful about the timing of the hero's appearance. Obviously, he's not going to reveal what that means, and just says the emperor made a quite peculiar request, but the Lord doesn't need to worry about that now. To continue, Cain wants to know if the barbarian is still in the city, and the Lord explains our hero said he was going to stay, so he thinks so. So with that, Cain decides to visit Catal in person. Outside the mansion, the guard chief asks the hero what he plans to do now, and the young man isn't sure. He received a reward earlier for the duel, and the promise that the Lord himself won't interfere with whatever he does in the territory. Catal tells the guard chief he doesn't know what to do, but he wanted real identification, because it'd be a problem having to go into a dungeon every time he visits a new city. Since that's the case, the guard explains that either someone of status sponsors him and vouches for his identity, or if he becomes a guild-recognized mercenary, his status would be recognized. The soldier thinks what a mercenary earns is pretty little for our hero's level, and that a sponsorship would be better. Except our boy is a true gamer at heart, so being a mercenary, earning money to hunt monsters, is a dream for him, reborn into a fantasy world. With that, the young man is decided and asks how to become one. The guard chief explains there's a guild building, and our hero, quite excited, asks him to show the way. Some people, like Catal, romanticize the mercenary life, traveling the world and doing quests. But in this society, mercenaries are a low existence, an unhealthy profession full of death and a lot of dirty work. At the guild itself, a fight is breaking out. A man falls among the crates and barrels after taking a huge punch to the face, but already gets up asking if the other guy wants to die, while the man who hit him tells him to come at him then. While the fight goes on, two other extras are betting on it. Away from this random fight, a pink-haired receptionist asks another how the new recruits who arrived in the city are doing. Rosa, the blonde one, says the group is a bunch of weirdos made up of a lunatic who says he's a paladin, a rogue, and a cleric who seems calm until she says the name of the goddess she serves. In other words, not a single decent mercenary among them. Rosa is also tired of these thugs and weirdos and dreams of a hot prince showing up and taking her away from this job. It's in this funeral-like atmosphere that the door opens and, to the little blonde's surprise, the imposing figure of Catal, who's just a little different from a prince, appears in the guild. Even the brawlers and extras are frozen, staring at the hero, who has no idea what's causing everyone's reaction. The legendary barbarian goes up to the counter and asks to become a mercenary. Rosa, clearly uncomfortable, asks why he wants to become a mercenary. Catal explains that the main reason is to have his status recognized, and the girl explains that until that happens, he'll have to rack up quite a few achievements. Since he's calm about that, she asks for a 5 copper coin registration fee, and our hero's name and age. Since the young man doesn't know his own age in this world, Rosa just makes up something that seems about right. With the registration complete, Rosa hands him the mercenary crest. She explains this represents his status as a mercenary, and tells the young man not to lose it, and the kid is delighted, already wanting to know what kind of job he can take right off the bat. Rosa then shows the barbarian the list of quests he can currently take, and as soon as he sees the list, his smile disappears. They're beginner quests, so there's only simple stuff like patrolling, gathering plants, cleaning a basement, sewers, and streets. Knowing about Barbarian's famous pride, Rosa starts trembling with fear that she's insulted him, but still says he can only take this kind of task because of his starting rank for now. Still terrified, she explains that by completing quests he'll rank up. But before she even finishes her rehearsed speech, Catal picks one of the missions. To Rosa's surprise, our hero picked the plant collection one. After double-checking to see if he picked the right one, the young man says he's fine with it. Catal asks where he needs to gather the herbs, and the woman shows him a photo of a flower and says it's near the village. Without a second thought, our guy grabs the picture and heads out to complete the task. Rosa is surprised at how strangely easygoing the barbarian is. Catal walks out the door, and the two receptionists are relieved and confused. In the woods near the city, our hero finds the flowers he was looking for. On the paper, it says these plants are good for wounds, and the boy finds them odd. That said, he switches to gear to protect from the sun and starts his first job as a mercenary. Almost an hour passes, and our guy comes back with a sack full of the little plants from the mission. Catal asks if it's enough, and Rosa answers, it's a lot, even wondering if his goal was to deforest the entire field. What surprises the little blonde attendant is that all the collected plants are in perfect condition, while other mercenaries usually just rip them out carelessly. The gray barbarian, quite proud, says he's proud of having a gentle hand. The reward for the mission is a measly single silver coin, which barely pays for a stale little bread roll. Still, it's the first honest money he's earned from work so far, which fills the young man with pride. Catal asks for another mission, and Rosa can't even believe this man is happy with the pittance they paid him. The Grey Barbarian explains he wants to do as much work as possible while it's still daylight. Rosa thinks the Barbarian is a weirdo too. After a while, the hero has already completed 3 cleaning-related missions and asked for the next one to be warehouse cleaning, which makes Rosa think this Barbarian really likes cleaning. He accepts the quest, and after a little while arrives at the warehouse, introducing himself for the cleaning job. The warehouse owner got that basic little scare, but the hero quickly introduces himself to her. Cleaning the warehouse was easy for the man, who carried box after box with ease. Cleaning the streets was also smooth, at least for them, because the dust he kicked up even while controlling his strength was enough to kill someone. The one spying on the hero's missions is Kane, who doesn't understand why he'd subject himself to this. The legendary Barbarian is at least superhuman, powerful enough to shift the balance of an entire kingdom if he wanted, just by showing off his strength and demanding respect. And even so, there he is, doing simple tasks, and not even with ill will. The boy is working with genuine enjoyment. The old man can't understand why this barbarian is such a weirdo. The next day begins, and after stretching, our hero sees the little bag of money on his bed's headboard. He remembers receiving it as a reward the day before, for having completed 15 missions. Rosa hands over the money, and Catal promises he'll be back the next day. Now, back in the present, it's time to start the second day in civilization. We see a little kid crying in the street and a bunch of shocked citizens, scared of the Grey Barbarian. Our hero, for his part, walks around quite calmly until he comes across a bookstore up ahead. The doorbell rings and the librarian, quite cute by the way, welcomes him, only to be surprised by a wall of muscle with a scary look, asking to read some books. Catal spends a good while entertained, reading in the library, while the librarian watches, incredulous. The old man who's still spying also finds it quite odd, a barbarian, a group known for their ignorance and brutality, being entertained by reading, and even wonders if the barbarians of the icy lands are more cultured than other groups. The other, simpler possibility is that this Grey Barbarian of legend is just a special fellow. Our hero finishes reading a bit of history and understands the Empire won the war. He remembers millennia, whose goal was to sell weapons to the kingdom that was at war with the Empire. Except it seems the Empire won, becoming even more powerful and subjugating the kingdom of Varkan. The Empire has also been growing and expanding aggressively across nearly half of the known world, as if wanting to devour the whole world. Our hero thinks a bit about the Empire's goal, but soon sets it aside to look at something more interesting, for a fan of fiction and fantasy like him. A book about non-human races, since all these fantastical things he was a fan of are real in this world. There are special places too, like the Dwarf Cave, which is packed with valuable ores, the Mantamia Cave, the Fairy Valley, Pisarapia, the Sky City of Lagameria, or the Sacred Elf, the Holy Land of all elves. Unknown to many, a target for various humans and sovereigns. And seeing this, our guy feels special for having the information and the means to enter that place. At that moment, something else stirred his curiosity. Are there other places like the Icy Lands? Yes, there are quite similar lands, all called demonic zones, known for rejecting human presence. The main demonic areas are the Silent Forest, which makes things immobile, the Abyss, which is home to pure evil, the Depths, which are home to abyssal creatures, the Deep Void, where nothing exists, and the Icy Fields. These demonic zones are home to aberrations, which for some reason can't leave these zones. Knowing this, Catal realizes this world is quite big, and is surprised by the existence of other places like that. Standing up, he figures he's learned everything he could about the world there, and thanks the librarian for her help before heading out. After this stop, he heads to the Mercenary Guild to ask Rosa for a mission. The girl, still slightly frightened, hands him the new mission list. Kane finds the boy strange and decides to confront him directly. The day passes and it's nighttime again. The Grey Barbarian walks down the street after having completed at least a dozen missions that day. The reward is small, but he's satisfied and eager to be recognized as a true mercenary. Kane waits for the hero and intercepts him along the way in a dark alley. Finally, Catal says he knew the man had been following him all day and asks what he wanted. While the wrinkled sword lord is thinking about how he was found out, the barbarian hides his bag, thinking the man was a thief. confusing the old weapons master even more, who, by not answering, only deepens the misunderstanding for our hero. The old man starts trying to explain himself, afraid that no matter what he says, it'll be hard to convince Catal. To everyone's surprise, Catal realizes the thief is an old man and says, "Geez, for someone to be robbing an old guy like this place's economy must be a real sad thing," and decides to defeat him and bring him to justice to improve his records. The old man decides to take advantage of the misunderstanding, to get a chance to test the barbarian's strength in practice. And with that, the gray barbarian starts slowly approaching the troublesome old man, until moving faster than the swordmaster can keep up with. The man's speed is surprising, and the old man gets even more scared when the gray one stops just a few centimeters from him and extends his hand. Realizing the danger, Cain uses his aura to dodge at the last second, which even surprises our protagonist. The boy thinks the old man isn't bad at all and seems excited to fight, while the sword lord himself realizes that if his reflexes had been just a little worse, he would have been grabbed by someone with not a single trace of aura, meaning the barbarian's monstrous speed comes from his muscular body, not from power. Since the risk has become huge, the old man gives up on testing the man's limits and decides to go all in seriously. The legendary barbarian falls silent and disappears from his sight once again, grabbing the man before he could even react, even with heightened perception. Catal squeezes the old man's hand, who feels like his arm is caught in a rock slide. The young man's power is at such a huge level that it's not possible to compete with it, and if that's the case, the old man decides to release the full power of his aura. Catal feels the old man's aura, who turns to the hero and lands a powerful blow to escape. With a bit of residual aura on his hand, all our barbarian thinks is, "These criminals nowadays are something else, huh?" Still thinking it's a criminal he's dealing with. The old man covered himself in mana so powerful that only the elite could manage it, and still, the hero thinks he's some petty street thug. The battle-hardened old man manifested a mana strike capable of cutting through solid steel like butter, and the protagonist is completely intact, without a scratch. Cain is incredulous at how our hero's body can be so armored as to withstand these manifestations with no protection at all. Catal, meanwhile, is already wanting to end the conflict right there and stop with the little games. The sword lord gets ready to draw his blade, and to absolutely nobody's surprise doesn't even have time to try, because the hero stops him with just a little finger and a "it's over, Gramps" smile, to the old man's despair. The old man still tries to push through, but the sword won't budge even a centimeter. With his other hand quickly approaching, the old man prepares for his own end. A little while later, there's our hero, carrying the old man on his shoulder saying, "Wow, so this is what a criminal is like in a fantasy world." The guard captain is pale, unable to believe what he's seeing. Why on earth was Swordmaster Cain there? And worse, did the barbarian actually attack Sir Cain? But the poor captain's world collapses when Catal explains he caught a criminal, and all goofy, asks if turning him into the guards will count toward his mercenary record. Man, the guard is more lost than anything else, and tries to replay the surreal scene in his head to see if it makes sense. Swordmaster Cain, a top-tier superhuman, was captured by a barbarian in a pretty humiliating way. The guard tries to explain that the old man isn't a criminal, but that makes the gray barbarian think the captain is a corrupt accomplice then. Except the soldier snaps his feet together and pays respect to the one and only sword lord of the kingdom of Gehentra, Swordmaster Cain. The gears start turning in the gray barbarian's head, and he doesn't understand how someone with such a fancy title could be a criminal, and tries to explain to the guard that it's impossible because the old man tried to steal his hard-earned silver coins. The guard explains he'd recognize the man's face anywhere, and not willing to let go of this catch, Catal asks if it couldn't be some kind of disguise magic. The guard says that if someone had magic that powerful, they'd be a swordmaster anyway, and Catal asks if swordmaster happens to be some fancy title for a criminal. Except since that makes absolutely no sense to ask, our hero finally understands the man really is a master. The guard promises to report this confusing situation to the city's lord. At the mansion, the lord is terrified by the news that Cain lost the fight. In another corner of the palace, our hero apologizes for not letting the old man explain himself, and the old weapons master apologizes for not saying anything at the time. The embarrassment of the surreal situation creates a heavy mood between the two of them, and it's in this atmosphere that the lord enters the room, accompanied by the guard captain, unable to believe the old man would lose a duel, and that can only mean the barbarian's power is beyond the level of a sword lord. It's already known that there are power levels above sword lords, and since old Cain only recently received the title, he's still on the lower end of that rank. But even so, a master swordsman has to earn the title of sword lord, and a barbarian defeated him, making our hero an almost unstoppable force. The The Lord pauses for a bit and explains he's going to leave the two of them alone to resolve the misunderstanding and asks them to talk it out between themselves. The door closes and that heavy mood from before continues. The two of them stare at each other in silence. For Cain, it's humiliating to have lost so badly, and his pride is shot, but since staying silent isn't going to help, he introduces himself as Master Swordsman Cain. Katal asks if that's a surname or a title, and Cain explains that once you reach the status of Sword Lord, surnames stop mattering. The Barbarian asks if what the man used in the fight was a Master Swordsman technique. Cain realizes what he's talking about and shows off the greenish aura. Katal hadn't paid much attention when he thought it was just a criminal's trick, but now knowing it's a master's ability, he's interested. The limping old man lets him know that's the aura, a physical representation of arcane power. Amazed, our hero remembers the fight and is surprised to understand that what let the man escape him was the aura. Excited, the gray barbarian asks how to use aura. In short, you have to control your arcane energy to manifest it, and it's kind of like magic, a mystical energy that can manifest in various forms. Swordsmen use aura, while mages manifest it as mana. After understanding this, the barbarian asks to learn how to use this arcane power because he still doesn't understand how it works. No pressure, right? Except what confuses Cain is, does this guy actually need help? The barbarian explains he has no skill or technique. He just knows how to swing his arms around and that's it. With a bit of his ego back, Cain remembers he couldn't even draw his sword, and he's a master swordsman, so he decides to become the boy's master to show off how cool he is. So Cain accepts and explains he's a sword lord, and that without his sword, he's only half of what he'd normally be. Not realizing he was being insulting, our hero replies that he noticed he was just pathetically weak because he wasn't using his sword, especially since being called a weak master swordsman like that meant there was something odd going on, and he still believes the old man would have won if he'd used his weapon. The old man, even seeing the young man eager to start, is worried about whether his self-esteem is going to make it through. Before being reborn, our protagonist learned fencing, but now, what Cain masters is a real fantasy world sword technique, with arcane power and all that. Training begins. Swordmaster Cain gives that opening speech, explaining that his technique is a mix of reality and illusion, like what he showed in the fight with the Lord's Knight. Katal remembers the sword seemed to split into 3 copies, but all of them seemed real, and that's what physical manifestation means. This kind of power is more a feat of skill than brute strength, since the art of the sword has to do with blending the weapon with arcane aura, and only someone who fully masters that becomes a master swordsman. To demonstrate, Cain projects his aura onto the sword, and our hero gets all excited. The situation is pretty odd for the old man, teaching sword skills to a barbarian, but the swordmaster continues explaining that the idea of physical manifestation of reality and illusion might seem a bit hard to understand, so it's easier for him to just demonstrate. With aura control through the sword, the ground breaks with the attack, which then splits into 5 similar cuts after impact. This attack leaves the barbarian quite surprised, since the 5 split attacks advance and cause quite a bit of damage against the wall. The master explains that there are many techniques capable of creating illusions with aura, except giving them physical form is something only a swordsman can achieve. And the young man remembers the technique the man used in the fight, which was an arcane technique. But Katal interrupts, saying, "I think I can do that too," leaving the old man speechless since he needed a lot of training to reach this level, so there's no way someone could learn and copy it just from watching, right? Our protagonist decides to demonstrate what he meant and draws his axe, gets into position, and simply starts attacking multiple positions with immense speed. Obviously, this has nothing to do with using aura. The man is just swinging the axe really fast, until he manages to replicate a pirated version of the 5-blade attack using pure speed and brute force. The attack's impact is explosive and leaves Master Cain surprised. With the axe smoking, our hero asks the man how he did. It really did resemble the old man's illusory attack, but executed purely with superhuman strength and speed. The old man answers that the young man achieved a feat of strength, but it lacked technique, except the hero explains the result is the same, and that it would work in a real fight. To the barbarian, the result is all that matters, and as much as he's right, this is humiliating for the old man. Except he's not willing to concede the point, and decides to demonstrate another technique, body separation, projecting copies in multiple directions. With this technique, the destruction caused is immense, and the area around the two of them turns into a crater. The old man explains that separating your body like that requires enormous control and mastery over aura, challenging our hero to copy it. And sure enough, the barbarian gets into position, steps back a bit from the master, and grabs his axe. He replicates the technique by abusing brute force and speed, Kane is stunned as the barbarian generates a field of wind and cuts that becomes almost a hurricane of pure area damage, causing quite a bit of destruction to the poor arena. After that, he still has the nerve to ask the poor master, who's lying there incredulous with not a shred of pride left, what he thought of it. After seeing his life's work and technique replicated without even using aura, the man simply has no more words or pride left. The old man is in shambles, extremely upset, and to top it off, our legendary barbarian says he's emotionally quite fragile. Calmly, the barbarian explains the man's ability is remarkable, while all Katal did was swing his axe really fast. What the man demonstrated wasn't just an illusion like what our hero did, but something real, the result of a mastery the barbarian doesn't think he can reach. And deep down, the master knows he's right. There's still value in the technique. Turning illusion into something tangible is a feat exclusive to Kane. The problem wasn't the technique, but rather the barbarian's monstrous abnormal speed, which exceeds what a human should naturally be capable of. Except, interrupting this train of thought, our hero is humble and asks to learn the real technique. Kane apologizes for letting his emotions take over his judgment and composes himself, explaining that before the technique, the young man needs to learn to control aura. Except even to control aura, he needs to understand the arcane first. To be a swordsman, witch, or mage, you need to awaken the arcane. The only exception is those with divine power, like paladins and clerics. Divine power is granted by the gods and doesn't depend on skill, while the arcane is a mysterious power that exists within everyone. The difference is in how a person uses that power. So the key to using aura, mana, or controlling other powers of the fantasy world is understanding the arcane. The arcane has 5 categories. The basic one is perception, the ability to sense and understand the arcane itself. In other words, not everyone can even sense the arcane. These are the famous third class. The ability to use mana is divided into 5 levels, with third class being the lowest of all. Our hero remembers Melina had said the same thing in the carriage years ago. Third class, second class, first class, superhuman, and hero. Now finally, our protagonist understood what she meant back then. Kane adds that it's just a convenient category, since within one class the difference between individuals can be quite large, and sometimes the difference between levels isn't clear. With the explanation out of the way, the old man decides to start training by exercising arcane perception. The master tells Katal to close his eyes and expand his senses to the max. Feel the leaves and the wind, the touch of the earth, the sway of the trees, and in the middle of all that, a unique presence. The barbarian even tries, except he doesn't seem to be able to sense anything. That's not quite what the old man expected to hear, and he believed it'd be easier for someone with the Grey One's strength. It's not a hard rule, but those who are strong even without mana usually sense the arcane more easily, and maybe it's something related to the icy lands. The barbarian explains that no other barbarian he knows seems to have ever sensed something like that. Well, it's not like sensing the arcane is a simple feat either, so the old man has the idea of channeling a bit of energy into the reborn one, to open up his pathways. In other words, almost like an aura transfusion or something like that at least. Excited, our protagonist accepts right away. The old man stands up and asks the hero to relax and focus his senses on his own body while he does the channeling. Kane is impressed by the hardness of his muscles, which seem almost like solid rock, as if the muscle mass had been compressed until it became super dense. The hero asks what's happening, and the old man admits he got a little distracted, but decides to start guiding the flow of aura. He warns our hero that he's going to try to find the pathway to awaken his inner mana, which shouldn't be too difficult. Except clearly it wasn't going to be a piece of cake, and the man gets a bit scared, simply unable to find the mana pathway inside the hero. Actually, it's not that he can't find it, the man just can't reach it. He can extend his aura as much as he tries, but it's like diving into an immense void. It doesn't touch anything. He feels that if he dives much further, he'll be crushed by the pressure of that void. So Kane gives up, saying it's not going to work. Of course, when he says that, our hero understands he has no talent at all to learn this. But the old man says that's not it. Channeling aura isn't enough. He needs to find the inner pathway and awaken the dormant power. The problem is, in this case, the old man just can't find that pathway. Our barbarian is almost discouraged, believing he'll never even be able to sense the arcane. Except that's not quite it. The master explains he simply can't even confirm whether or not the young man has a mana pathway, because his body isn't natural. The density is too great for Kane's aura to reach very far into him, like a shield interfering with the mana. Since even a sword master can't help, Katal starts losing hope, believing he'll never awaken his arcane power. Except Kane can't confirm whether that pathway exists in the hero or not. To the old man, our protagonist could look for a more skilled master or visit the mage tower before apologizing for not being able to help. At least there's still hope, and the young man clings to that for now. The barbarian thanks him. At least he learned a lot from the man. Cain has already met a few barbarians, but they were all uncontrollable. They'd pillage and lived violently. Except our protagonist is different, and because of that, Cain asks if he's ever thought about joining the kingdom. The man explains that if the gray barbarian swore loyalty to the kingdom, he'd receive a rank, and with his strength he'd rise very quickly. The master even offers to be his sponsor. Our hero refuses, because he doesn't want to be tied down to just one place. If the barbarians swore loyalty, they'd have the power to bring down the empire's control. Cain asks if not even a noble title tempts the young man. Except what our protagonist really wants is to be free. So alright, the master accepts the boy's decision. Even though he refuses the offer, the gray barbarian thanks the master for all his kindness. Thoughtfully, the swordmaster walks down the hallways, believing that the idea of having any control over Isekai'd, a barbarian who acts on his own, is impossible. He might even work with others, but he has his own thoughts. What makes him more dangerous is not knowing exactly what's going on in his head, being a being that came from a demonic zone. Sighing, Cain wonders what the mad emperor had in his head when he tried to conquer the icy plains. The master comes to talk to the Lord, and it seems the current emperor really does want to conquer the icy lands. Cain explains that people are dying in the name of reconnaissance missions, and the situation is serious. The master says he doesn't quite understand why they'd want to dominate the demonic zones when they haven't even dominated the whole human world yet. And the Lord realizes it's only a matter of time before these lands are called upon for such missions too, and they need to prepare. The world is going crazy, and to make matters worse, the emperor has lost a few screws. The Lord is startled. Something Cain said made him realize something. The rumors might be true. Demons have started acting up. Demon escapes aren't normal, and although nothing's confirmed yet, it seems the contamination of the demonic zones is spreading, which means something's going on, and whatever it is could put humanity at risk. Except maybe, out of everything strange happening, maybe the strangest thing of all is our barbarian among them. Cain asks what the noble thinks of that, and the Lord is satisfied that at least the gray barbarian isn't an enemy, but there's nothing else they can know beyond that. The next day, our hero is walking through the city, and unfortunately, it seems everyone is still scared of him, hiding or moving away whenever he passes by. Noticing this situation, he thinks it might be because of his clothes. Maybe he's scary because he's not wearing civilized clothing. Since that's the case, it's time to get some new clothes for the gray barbarian. The tailor shop has top-notch clothes and fabrics. Our hero walks through the door and the tailor gets quite a scare, with a mountain of muscle in front of him asking to buy clothes. The man apologizes but explains he doesn't have anything big enough for the young man, unless it's a custom order. Isekai'd gets quite excited by the idea and agrees to get something custom made. The man lets him know he'll get in touch when it's ready, while mentally preparing himself to die violently in case he doesn't make clothes the young man likes. Since the clothes will still take a while to be ready, our hero heads to the guild. But along the way, he finds a bluish jewel on the ground and picks it up. It could be a precious stone, a pretty one at that, which even seemed to have an ocean inside it. He sets that aside for now, and decides he'll ask about it at the guild later. Inside, the young man asks Rosa if she knows what this stone is, that he found on the street, since it doesn't look like a normal stone. The girl starts examining it. The surface of the stone is smooth, and looks like it's been cut and polished. While she looks for any name or marking, the stone's glow seems to put the girl in a trance, leaving her looking quite strange. Luckily for Rosa, our hero snaps his fingers, pulling her out of the trance, and she's a bit dazed about what happened. Isekai'd asks if she's okay, and she answers that she seemed to be in a trance because of the sphere, but asks to let that go for now. The girl explains the orb is odd, and seems to have some strange energy coming from it. The barbarian waives the value assessment, and explains part of the fun is going to be investigating it himself before asking for the day's mission list. Rosa hands over a list of simple tasks, and our guy seems satisfied. Night falls, and this was another satisfying, honest day for him. But the orb is still curious after all. Rosa really did seem to be in a trance, so there's something going on there. Focusing a bit, Isekai'd manages to hear a voice coming from the orb, calling to him. Isekai'd finds himself inside his own mind, hearing the stone's call, which conveniently projects a map for him. Back in his room, since the young man has nothing better to do, he decides to follow the map. The boy is following the voice, while complaining about the "come to me" being repeated infinitely in his head. After walking a bit, he comes across something, a cave giving off a sinister energy, clearly not a trap. When he enters, a creature senses the hero's presence. Ketal asks where the body behind the voice in the jewel is. The creature watches the barbarian from a distance, excited about another sacrifice walking in to serve as an offering. It seems this skeleton in magic robes has already claimed 10 victims with this method, and everything indicates it's seeking a full resurrection. In the era of the Great War, an evil mage manipulated kings and pulled the strings of history until he was hunted down by heroes for his malevolent deeds. The problem is the mage had already transferred his soul into a totem, meaning he became a lich, beings who are immortal until the item containing their soul is destroyed. But since nobody wants to be pure bone forever, the lich planned his resurrection. And since he needed sacrifices to be revived, he chose a small city and started gradually luring sacrifices in. The sacrifices are offered to the Manticore to revive him and conquer the world once again. The lich seems confused by the barbarian's presence. He chose a remote place to be able to grow his power in secret. Considering the city is small and far away, it's unusual for the lich to see a barbarian, but it's even better. A bigger offering will do just fine. According to the skeleton, the orb only attracts those who haven't awakened to the arcane yet. So to the monster, the barbarian is just an ordinary person, even though he seems unaffected. Fully in villain pose, the lich calls out to the hero. Our hero is in front of a large door, and when he enters, he comes face to face with that skeleton, with blue eyes glowing like sands, a giant mage's cloak, and a pretty cool staff waiting for him. The hero is enchanted, seeing a real lich. Only mages who reach the extreme become liches. This is one of the toughest villain types in fantasy worlds. The monster asks what the boy is and how he wasn't drawn in by the orb. With this question, our hero realizes this is how the creature has been getting its victims. The lich is confused. Since he doesn't sense any arcane power in the boy might be using mental protection equipment strong enough to block the lich's senses. Except the barbarian isn't using anything at all. He barely has clothes on his body. Except the lich doesn't believe that, and says that if the hero had fallen for the spell, he'd have had a more peaceful death. And while transforming the victim's bones into skeletons, the monster promises to humiliate the legendary barbarian and sends his minions to advance. And the skeletons charge to attack, but our hero understands what's going on. And right when one of the undead prepares to attack, the barbarian just gives it a slap and dissolves the monster. The lich is even surprised, but the gray one is just complaining that the beasts are too fragile. With his ego wounded, the undead mage raises a few more and tells them to rip off arms and legs, but keep him alive to serve as a sacrifice. But since one skeleton didn't work, sending more wasn't going to work either, and with one blow, there goes another monster, and then another. A third one gets a kick for a healthy bit of variety, and a final one is thrown to the ground. The lich's mouth drops so wide open in surprise, all that's missing is his jaw hitting the floor. Ketal remembered Keisan's advice, that if you attack and destroy the head, the monsters go down. Honestly, the legendary barbarian is disappointed. He thought the lich would at least summon undead or stronger skeleton knights, but just basic little skeletons is a ripoff. With his pride wounded, the lich says he's done being nice, and summons a skeleton knight, which is a repeat character for our hero, who finds it interesting to see another one in a situation like this. Since the armor and origin are different, Ketal thinks it might be interesting. The lich gives the order, and the skeleton knight charges forward, except our hero is just excited to see what a knight created by a lich is capable of. The skeleton knight charges, attacking with a sword swing, which our hero dodges and counters with a punch to what would be its stomach if a skeleton had one. The creature is thrown far away, causing a fairly large impact explosion. To our surprise, it wasn't a one-hit kill, and from the smoke comes the skeleton, its armor cracked, but as alive as a skeleton can be, showing it's a bit more resilient than the others. The lich tells it to unleash its mana, and one of the monsters starts advancing, covered in mana, toward our hero. The skeleton advances desperately, closing in, covered in mana, except the gray barbarian just clenches his fist and lands a punch straight to the skeleton knight's skull, throwing the entity far away in yet another destructive impact. Now, the lich has finally realized the tight spot he's in. The skeleton knight was unusual, but in the end, the result was the same. Our protagonist approaches the lich, asking if the mage is done already. The creature wonders who he is, since the boy didn't seem to have any awakened arcane, nor any artifact to hide or shield him. The man defeated the skeleton knight and shielded himself from its influence through pure brute force. Realizing that should be impossible, the lich admits the barbarian is special, and because of that, the creature decides to fight face to face. And spreading a black aura across the room, the necromancer mage says it'll be an honor for our hero. The darkness spreads around the young man, plunging the whole room into shadow. Starting the mind games, the Lich asks if the Barbarian is scared and says this is the price for the hero's invasion. Except Katal just answers that he only showed up because of the orb that called him, and asked if the big guy hadn't scattered these spheres around to lure people in. So it's true. If it weren't for the orbs, no one would have been sacrificed. And our hero wouldn't have entered there either, so this isn't really an invasion. The Lich lost that argument, but tells the Barbarian to shut up, saying he's Cardos Brennulus Kesses, a supreme mage who brought 5 kingdoms to ruin and all that villain nonsense. But what surprises the Barbarian is the number of surnames people have in this world, while remembering the Elf Queen's giant name. Summoning dark power from his staff to fire, the Lich says the hero is going to be the cornerstone of the mage's rebirth. The blast spins in a hypnotizing way, drawing Katal's attention. This Lich's magic controls human emotions, trapping victims in a state of broken mentality, which is why the creature thinks the story's protagonist doesn't stand a chance. The monster is already thinking about what to do with the hero and wants to study the young man. To find out the source of his impressive defenses and snapping his fingers, summons more skeletons to capture the Grey One alive. Except when the skeleton advances, our hero shows he wasn't paralyzed at all and kicks the thing far away like it's a soccer ball, eliminating the monster and causing immense dread in the monster's heart. Seeing the destruction caused, the Lich doesn't understand anything. Didn't the mind control spell work? Katal asks if the Lich's attack really was just to stand there doing nothing, sending little skeletons again, because that's pretty boring. Another hit to the great undead mage's pride. Humans are driven by heart and emotion, no matter how hard they try. Deep down, everyone carries negativity, so it shouldn't be possible to resist emotional control magic. Except the Barbarian is different, and besides still being standing, he's even asking if the Lich can't use some cooler power like a fireball, magic missiles, Sectum Sempra. Except the mage is fed up already and summons some heavy-duty magic. The Lich creates an orb of darkness and orders that this magic devour all light and plunge the world into darkness, damn it. Finally, Katal is excited. A cool spell to fight against. With a giant skeletal hand and a pretty cool glitch effect, the Lich orders our hero to be consumed, while the darkness advances over the Barbarian with a shadowy jet of destruction. Triumphant, the fallen mage with the giant name the writer's already forgotten sings victory, letting out an evil cackle and chokes on it, saying he overdid it this time and ended up using up too much of the mana that was holding his body together. Except since there'd be no more story if the villain won here, of course the Barbarian is still standing, and even worse for the poor Lich. He's completely intact, asking if that was all the undead had to show. Now almost out of mana, the Lich is just stunned that not even that worked. The spell the Lich used there was the pinnacle of emotional control, made to break the mind of even the strongest hero. Katal even comments that the magic seemed impressive, but he didn't feel anything from it. To give the Lich's bones a good cold sweat, the legendary Grey Barbarian pulls out his axe and says, "But if that's the end of your little show, I think it's my turn now." The big skull totally lost it and connected the dots in the most absurd way possible, saying he now understood everything, which leaves the protagonist quite confused. The Lich explains that he now understands our hero showed up, already knowing who the monster was. And that can only mean one thing, that the Empire was scared to death of the monster's resurrection, to the point of discovering his hideout. Cackling, the Lich says that no matter how clever they are, he'll still rise again to rule the earth. In the villain's head, everything makes sense. The Empire is known as the homeland of heroes and notable talents. So the Empire must have created our Grey Barbarian as the perfect assassin, made just to kill the Lich. Narcissistic? No way. Still, the monster warns that he's going to kill the hero and dominate the Empire. Katal doesn't understand a single word from the creature, and it's not because of a lack of lips, it's just a total lack of coherence. A magical amphora appears, glowing blue with the Lich's magic. The villain's idea now is to take the Barbarian's body for himself, devouring his mind. The downside is that the creature will have to live in that body forever unless he becomes a Lich again, but he wasn't seeing another choice. Except inside Katal's head, the Lich notices something odd. Our hero's mental world exerts such immense pressure that the villain feels his own mind collapsing. Now his delusions of grandeur fade away as he discovers that man was never an assassin sent by the Empire, simply because no one would have had the ability to create something like our protagonist. Realizing he'd never be able to take over Katal's mind, the Lich, disappearing, has as his last words a confused and honest, "Huh?" And on the outside, the Barbarian is just as confused, since from Katal's own point of view, the Lich did some kind of magic on himself and just fell flat on the ground. The legendary Barbarian is a bit disappointed. The creature's dark magic was cool, but a Lich was supposed to be sort of the final form of a mad mage. Looking at the pot on the ground, Katal just accepts that the Liches of this fantasy world are kind of weak, honestly. The Barbarian counts this like he'd just beaten a dungeon and grabs the mage's staff, thinking that if he uses the object, maybe he could cast spells too. Then he pulls out the blue jewel, and by his expression, it seems it was by accident, and pockets it before thinking that if it belonged to a Lich, maybe the amphora he summoned is the mage's soul vessel. So he decides to bring the jar to Rosa to analyze, and looks around for anything remotely suspicious before leaving the place. It doesn't take long for our hero to find a floating, odd seal, full of a dark aura, and he believes it's a secret room. With one finger, he already breaks the seal, showing he was right about the place. It wasn't just a common secret room, because it was full of imprisoned people. This was the room of victims for the Lich's sacrifice. The Barbarian's simple brain doesn't quite understand, but he advances through the secret room, wondering who these people are. Everyone there seemed to be in a complete trance. Not knowing what to do, the hero decides to go back to the city, since if he explains everything, they'll probably send someone capable of helping these people. We're back at the Mercenary Guild, with the Barbarian bringing the items for Rosa to assess. The girl is surprised by the hero's earlier-than-expected return, and seems much less scared of him already. Katal explains he had to deal with something, leaving the receptionist a bit confused. The Barbarian explains everything that happened since he found the orb yesterday. Rosa thinks it's a joke, especially because it wouldn't make sense for one of the world's 5 leeches to be in such a backwater town. Except our hero puts the amphora on the table and says it seemed to be the entity's phylactery, asking her to assess it. After that, it finally clicks for Rosa. The Barbarian wasn't joking around. While she processes the story, Katal explains there were people trapped there. He wasn't able to get them out of that place since their minds seemed broken, so he wanted the guild to send someone to examine them. The woman connects the dots. There have been disappearances lately, but no one could find any real leads on it, so it would make sense for this to be a Lich's doing. Now, understanding the urgency of the situation, Rosa says she's going to contact someone immediately. The poor guard captain walks into the guild after a while, and Katal greets the man, all sweet and friendly. The Barbarian says he already took care of the Lich, so the soldier can rest a little, and explains the situation. The guard captain recognized the Lich's giant name, and our hero asks if he recognized the Lich by name, and it seems it's quite obvious that yes. The guard says Kardos was a man who changed the course of the world, creating magic capable of tampering with emotions. He used that to manipulate kings and bring ruin to the world. The guard asks if this mage really came back as a Lich, and our guy answers that yes, but that the creature wasn't all that impressive, and in the end ended up self-destructing. The story doesn't make much sense, so the guard captain asks for a better explanation. The problem is that in the Barbarian's little head, that's really all that happened. Not knowing what to say about it, the guard turns and tells him to wait, that he's going to report to the Lord. The news stuns Barkin, who asks if it wasn't some other type of monster, except the guard explains that according to what the rescued people said, it really was a Lich, and there's still the phylactery, the soul vessel, to prove it. With this news, the Empire might take action and send investigators at any moment, and at the worst possible timing, since Master Cain is out of state. Things don't look good for the noble, who orders preparations to send word to the capital. Despite the headache, Barkin figures at least they're lucky, because it was the Barbarian who found it. Otherwise, things could be even worse. The Lich was probably preparing to be reborn, so he was in some very specific conditions. Even so, it was a remarkable feat, and they decide to reward Katal somehow. The hard part might be finding something worthy of the feat. The next day, as soon as the sun rises, someone calls the Lord, letting him know he's awake and lets the servants in. Except who comes rushing in is a maid, announcing that Aquaz, an inquisitor of the sun god, has arrived in the state of Barkan. The Lord gets dressed in a hurry, seeming quite desperate until he spots the pretty inquisitor. After a while, Aquaz and Barkan are seated. Barkan introduces himself and thanks her for the visit. Aquaz, the Inquisitor of the Sun God, also introduces herself. This woman isn't an Inquisitor for nothing. She beheaded 7 warriors who sold their souls to demons. She's a powerful Inquisitor, so much so that even the Empire itself submits to the Church of the Sun. The girl has much more power than any ordinary lord. Aquaz explains that a lot has been happening in the state of Barkan recently. The noble is relieved that it has nothing to do with the Lich, and decides to just say they had a little problem in the nearby dungeon, but that it's already been resolved. Before asking the reason for the Inquisitor's visit, she came to talk about the predictions of a divine oracle. Except before talking about the prediction, she asks the man to tell her more about what's been happening in the state, to Barkin's despair, who, with no other option, tells her everything. The stories shock even Aquas. A barbarian had defeated a lich, who was probably the infamous Carton Brunulus Kesses. The girl, stunned, asks for confirmation, and the Lord places the phylactery on the table. The Inquisitor is terrified, thinking about what on earth happened in this state. Holding the sun god's amulet, Aquas asks to know if this barbarian is still in Barkin's territory. The Lord explains that yes, Catal has been living in the territory. To the girl, the existence of the legendary barbarian already seems impossible. Except the Lord explains it's quite possible. The barbarian has even already faced and defeated Swordmaster Cain himself. Realizing the man's power, the sun's disciple asks about the barbarian's tribe of origin, and Barkin says Catal says he comes from the Icy Lands. Since the Icy Lands are a demonic zone, it's even harder for Aquas to believe that any being from that place could be capable of leaving for the world, and that convinces her this might be the real reason behind her visit to the territory. She asks about the barbarian and requests to meet him personally. In the inn room, our hero wonders how he's going to use the blue jewel he took from the lich's staff, and decides to just ask some mage about it in the future. Looking outside, he realizes it's almost time for him to head out, since earlier, the guard captain requested a meeting with him at the church. The soldier also asked the barbarian to be respectful, but Catal tells the man not to worry. After a while, the barbarian shows up to the soldier, ready to head out and meet the Inquisitor. In this fantasy world, there are various gods who can grant power and even incarnate. Here, churches serve to gather their servants. When our hero arrives, he's amazed by the beautiful little church, made of white bricks with yellow details. The guard explains someone will soon come to accompany him, and the doors open, revealing that the church's interior is quite beautiful. 3 nuns of the sun god appear to guide Catal to Inquisitor Aquas. The girl wastes no time, greets our protagonist, and introduces herself as Inquisitor of the sun god Aquas. Our gray barbarian also introduces himself, surprised the Inquisitor is so young, but confident in her abilities. Aquas, for her part, tries to understand the young man's smile, who gets straight to the point and asks why he was summoned. The woman explains it's about the incident with the lich. Cardos was a terrible man who committed enormous atrocities across the world, became a lich, and only heroes managed to stop him. Catal explains he heard everyone say that, but the Cardos he faced was weak, fragile, and self-destructed. The barbarian says she might not believe him, and unfortunately, he only has his own word to offer. The Inquisitor says if the matter is about trusting his word, she asks the young man's permission to have the sun god witness the conversation between them. Basically, the deity will observe and act as a divine lie detector. Aquas says if he feels uncomfortable, he can refuse, except Catal doesn't mind at all, especially since he doesn't want to miss the chance to experience divine power in practice. The man's enthusiasm surprises the Inquisitor, who asks if that doesn't make him uncomfortable. But to the young man, there's nothing uncomfortable about having a deity watch him, since he has nothing to hide, especially since he hasn't lied about what happened. So, the Inquisitor begins her prayer, asking for the sun's watchful gaze upon them, and to reveal lies and falsehoods. A divine light bathes the church and illuminates the whole room, surprising the barbarian, who can feel the presence alongside the light. What he feels is a being so massive it's hard to even explain. Except the emotion he feels coming from the deity is pure confusion. The two of them are still under the glow, and Aquas doesn't sense any divine reaction yet, so she decides to begin the interrogation. The Inquisitor explains that within the Pillar of Light, falsehood isn't permitted. Catal understands and accepts. The conversation begins under the sun god's watch. Catal answers all the questions about the encounter with the lich in the dungeon, and there's no negative reaction, meaning it's all true. In her head, our hero just got lucky that Cartos was probably preparing for his resurrection, which left him weakened and unable to use his full magic against the barbarian. Catal asks if she still has any doubts, and the girl says no, thanking him and apologizing if she seemed rude. But our hero was just happy to feel the divine power. Aquas decides to ask the young man a more personal question. She wants to know if he really came from the Icy Lands. Since it's not exactly a secret, Catal just says yes, making the girl realize he's the gray barbarian from the Mad Emperor's legends. but our protagonist surprises her by wanting to ask something too. The boy asks why she ended up there, and she explains she had a personal matter. Catal wants to know if that matter had to do with confirming whether he was some profane being. Aquaz tries to dodge the question, but our hero explains it's quite unlikely for a deity to appear just to serve as a sacred lie detector, so it must be something special. Since the two of them are still under the divine light, the Inquisitor can't lie either, so she confirms, but explains it's not like he was the target from the very beginning. There was a revelation from the divine oracle, and when Aquaz came to the domain, she decided to test whether our hero was the subject of that revelation. Honorably, the girl apologizes for hiding the hero's true intentions, who's fine with it, since he also found all of this quite interesting, and asks to ask one last question. Catal wants to know what the divine revelation was. Given the Inquisitor's situation, she decides to tell him, and explains something no reader can know yet, to keep the story's mystery. A while later, Barkan goes to see the Inquisitor. The Lord says she looks unsure, and the girl explains she met the Barbarian, but only left the meeting more confused than she went in. Our hero really did come from the Icy Lands. Even though she didn't learn much about the place, she was able to confirm he came from there. Lord Barkan warns that if this truth spreads, a lot of people might want to explore the snowy fields, including the Emperor, which would be chaos. The girl tells Luke Barkan not to worry so much. The Church of the Sun will handle the Emperor and keep the Barbarian's origin a secret. The Lord wonders if all the barbarians of the icy desert are like our hero, but the woman says no, or else they'd have conquered the world a long time ago. There are other barbarians in the world. They're good fighters, but somewhat simple-minded. But if other powerful ones like our hero were also just as intelligent, the situation would be chaotic. Barkan comments that indeed, the Barbarian King seems to be quite different, having both intelligence and strength. Aquaz only met the king once, but confirms he's different. Barkan thinks it'd be quite a show for the two of them to meet, but she disagrees. Basically, barbarians don't usually get along well with servants of the gods, so the power of a barbarian growing this much is a serious matter for the Inquisitor. Barkan asks if she needed to see him alone because of the revelation, but she explains she just needed to confirm whether our hero was 100% human or something posing as one. And when she's about to talk about the revelation to the Lord, the author of the story hides it from us again. But judging by the Lord's face, it's something intense. Barkan invites our hero for tea and asks if he's doing well. Catal explains he's living quite well thanks to the noble, and wants to know why he was summoned now. The Lord has something to let him know, but first, thanks him for dealing with the Lich, saying it would have been a catastrophe without the hero, and apologizes, but explains the barbarian's feat can't be made public. If this feat reaches the Emperor's ears, he'll likely decide to act. Catal doesn't care either way, but the Lord explains he's at least prepared a reward for saving the region. In front of the boy, one of the Lord's servants sets down a leather bag. Luke explains it's not just any leather bag. Catal picks up the bag, and the man tells him to open it. In short, this is an artifact made to store various items in a pocket dimension. The Barbarian is surprised, since it's a magical artifact, the first one he's ever seen. According to the Lord, even objects bigger than the bag's opening can be stored inside. Hearing that, the Barbarian decides to test it with his axe right away, and even though it doesn't look like it'll fit, the object is instantly sucked in. To take the axe back out, all you have to do is put your hand in the bag and think about the object. Catal is very happy with the gift. The Lord is more at ease seeing the boy's almost childlike joy at the gift. Now in the Lord's mind, the matter he still needs to worry about is the borders. Beings from the demonic zones escaping, as if something's wrong with the world, and everything seems to be connected to the revelation. Now finally we're going to find out what the oracle said. Basically, a great evil is going to descend upon the earth and spread across the world. The territory of Barkan has several connected villages, which kept in contact with each other, until one of the villages stopped responding. After a day without contact, some people went to check and never came back. The guards sent by the Lord also didn't return, and that's when the Lord finally realized something strange was happening. At the guild, Rosa explains there's an urgent mission request today, coming from the Lord himself, to check on the village that stopped making contact. According to the receptionist, the request is simple, but the reward is quite substantial. And because of that, Catal accepts, surprising exactly 0 people. We have a group waiting near the city gates, including Cleric Hayes. Our hero approaches and greets the girl, who barely recognizes him in the nice new clothes the tailor had made. Catal explains the old ones were getting worn out, which is a lie, since we know he only asked for new clothes so nobody would be scared of him anymore. The girl is even impressed by the design, and the Barbarian explains he designed it himself. Hayes asks if Catal also accepted the mission, and the Barbarian explains yes, because he was interested. Our protagonist asks about Alessandro, the Paladin, and Kassan, the Rogue, but the cleric explains that since it's a posted quest, they might have just declined. The Barbarian looks around and says there are fewer people than he expected to find, since it's a simple request with a big reward. Our protagonist imagined they'd have at least 10 people. Hayes says it's because it seems dangerous. The request might be simple, but the reward is too valuable for such low complexity. Besides, there are rumors that not even the guards who went there came back. Even so, it seems like too few people for Katal's taste, and the cleric thinks it's because of another rumor, as she points to a figure well known among adventurers. It was Aquaz, the Inquisitor. Aquaz is the heretic hunter in the name of the sun god, and she'll be accompanying the mercenaries on this mission. That's why not many mercenaries would risk being near her, afraid of getting their heads ripped off. Katal says the girl is quite calm and kind, and that he's already talked to her, treating the woman almost like a friend. Hayes doesn't know how to react to that, and falls behind, a bit stunned. Our hero greets Aquaz, and the girl, dry as a rock, answers that she doesn't recall becoming friends with the Barbarian. But Katal just answers, well, what if we become friends starting now then? But the Inquisitor is worried about the fact that the cleric worships another god, Colossia, the god of lies. The Grey One confirms it, and Aquaz looks confused about the cleric's presence, since technically, followers of Colossia should be in a resting period right now. During such a period, only someone with a high rank would be permitted to be out and about, but she dismisses that, saying she might just be mistaken. The guard captain greets the group, and our hero is happy to see him. The man gets straight to the point and welcomes all the adventurers who accepted the request. With the group walking together, our returnee comments it almost feels like they're about to face a raid. He decides to ask Aquaz if her going along has anything to do with the divine revelation. Caught by surprise, the girl just answers that she can't say. The deity didn't give an exact date, so even though it might just be a village losing contact for real, there's still a chance that the great evil has descended upon the earth. The group arrives at the village. Except to the hero's surprise, the place looks deserted. This was the village entrance, so that didn't make sense. The guard captain asks what Aquaz thinks, but the girl doesn't sense anything coming from there, making the captain wonder if maybe the people just fled. The guard's order is to spread out and look for clues, Scooby-Doo style. An entire village's population simply vanished overnight. To the guard, it's impossible not to have a single trace left behind that could serve as a clue. After searching for a while, the blonde NPC finds some food on a table and calls the captain over. The soldier says they might have left it behind while fleeing, but the little blonde explains the food is still warm, as if it had just been prepared. And indeed, the dish still seems to be steaming. The strange thing is that communication with the village was lost several days ago. Besides, many people were sent to the location without returning. There also doesn't seem to be any trace of a hasty escape, a fight, or people hiding. Since none of that makes sense, the captain's order is to keep searching for now. Throughout the whole village, there are signs of life, but no sign of humans anywhere. No matter the search group, the reports are always the same, evidence that people were there just seconds ago, but no trace of life. The captain asks if Aquaz has a different read on things, but not even the Inquisitor knows what's happening. He asks our protagonist, but he also hasn't seen or sensed anyone yet. This total lack of any clue is driving the man crazy, so our hero has the idea of asking the other one who's watching them. Yep, our hero noticed the presence of someone different within the group and didn't say anything. The guard connects the dots and really does notice a woman who wasn't there before. The girl smiles and asks how she was noticed, since she was camouflaging herself so well. Katal just answers, "You thought I wouldn't notice a stranger appearing out of nowhere?" The girl finds this amusing and answers that normally he shouldn't even notice her presence at all, and points out that not even the sun god's Inquisitor noticed her presence. This woman looks at our hero and realizes he hasn't awakened his arcane power yet. Smiling, she finds the Barbarian interesting. The guard senses something frightening and orders everyone to spread out. Aquaz is standing still, terrified, unable to sense the woman's presence. And if not even now, with her right there, the Inquisitor of the most powerful church in existence is unable to detect this presence. It can only mean this woman is beyond demonic, or is at a totally absurd level of malevolent power, one impossible to detect the presence of. The woman starts melting, shifting form, saying she wished she could have followed them to see the domain, but she admits while transforming that the Barbarian is fun. Black horns emerge from the girl's hair, and her transformation ends, revealing she's a demon.